Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Gettin Gritty Wit It with your host, Yariv, Wolok, and my special guests for the evening from our co-stars of the show, the O&B Puckcast founders, which I like to say, Isiah and Chef. Isiah, how's it going, buddy?
All right. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Chef?
Wonderful to be here.
Awesome. I'm honestly super excited to have you guys. Like I was saying before, I'm pretty excited because I think this is like a great end of the year collaboration, right? We were both on the same network, right? We're both doing the show together. And then like after all is said and done, now we get together and kind of talk about the season. So let's talk about the Flyers' most recent win. Flyers came out pretty flat against the Devils. They go down 2-0 early in the game. They do what they've been doing pretty much all season, which is coming out slow. And I do think we have some evidence as to what those problems are now. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. The Flyers did, however, had a nice rebound after that. Brian Elliott did manage to win his 500th game, which was nice to see. The top line contributed. Claude Giroux had maybe one of the nicest passes off his skate of the year for a really nice setup there. But that second line definitely stole the show. Joel Farabee and Wade Allison definitely put on a hell of a performance for a couple of young guys, and Farabee probably had the best season out of everybody consistently all year round. It's like him and Giroux and Couturier essentially. But I want to talk about it. Isiah, let's go to you first. What are your thoughts of that game, and just what do you think about the win over the Devils?
Well, I mean, it was a nice way to wrap things up, but it's still a dirt sandwich, of a season. Like they showed a lot of who they were. Elliott was able to salvage the beginning of the game when the Devils just jumped on them, made the Flyers look slow. The Flyers weren't in the right spot. The Devils have some uber skilled personnel that are just starting to find their stride. Look out for them in the years to come. But the Flyers systematically broke them down to have a better team, to have more talent. And over the course of the game, it was nice to see the Flyers give the fans something to cheer about, particularly with Farabee getting the 20 goals and Allison looking like a guy who's definitely going to be at least a mid-six player next year.
Yeah, I like that. And he had 2 assists that game as well. Farabee with 2 goals. Chef, what'd you think?
It was nice. It was nice to actually see some, and I'll say some because they haven't all lived up. All the prospects we talked about in previous shows, and I think you were on one of them, we talked about how the Flyers are loaded with prospects, and it was nice to see some of them start to come to fruition. I mean, Tanner, before he got hurt, looked pretty decent. Wade Allison has been – I mean, we always talked about how we need that shoot first mentality. Boy, did he just like every time he touches his stick, he's firing from weird angles. And that's how he got that goal. The other night, it was a weird angle. It was awesome. And then he happened to be in the right spot to clean up some mess, with a tip in. And then Farabee doesn't get maybe his 20 goals if he's not on that line with Allison, who just keeps firing pucks at the net, which was great. I loved seeing that. I love seeing the young kids get their shot, get to try. We haven't even mentioned Cam York yet, who looked like silk out there. I mean, he was so calm and collective, especially that first game. You forgot. If you didn't see the number on his jersey, you'd have thought it was somebody else playing on the team. You thought it would be a veteran. So I have very, very high hopes for, especially in particular, those 3 players right there for next year. And I'd like to see a couple more of them throw into the mix. I think Zamula might compete. So I think – as much as like Isiah said, it was a dirt sandwich, and that's being polite. I think you could maybe make yourself a nice club sandwich and think about all the things you got to look forward to next year. All cooking puns.
Yeah, I love that.
You expect from the chef, right?
Yeah, yeah, and look, it is important to see, and anybody who listens to my podcast, they know I've been talking about Cam York from day one. My expectation is going to make the team out of camp. I've been saying that for over 12 months already. These guys, and especially Allison, I mean, I knew what that kid was capable of coming in. Is really with him, it's always been injuries. Can he uphold injuries? And Lazinski has similar problem. You saw Lazinski's now out with surgery, and he'll be out for a good amount of time. But Allison obviously looks like a keeper. I mean, the kid came in here. Doesn't he remind you of like a little bit of Scott Hartnell in a way? Not that he plays exactly the same, but he's got that same bubbly attitude. He shoots the net. He's super physical. He's making jokes on the bench. He's an exciting player overall.
Yeah. I mean, I think he does remind me of Hartnell right away when I think one of the first shots of him in like training camp, exhibition game, he was calling Cam York, Yam Court, and he was just shaking up the bench and just really being talkative in a way that we haven't seen since Hartnell. And the skill set's a little different, but he's a power forward. He's a little bit more shoot happy, which we definitely need. And, you can see why he gets hurt a lot too. I mean, he needs to learn to maybe not go for every play, because sometimes you get a little reckless with your body. But he's the polar opposite of most of the Flyers. And a guy that comes to mind, his polar opposite would be Nolan Patrick, who's somnolent and looks like he's just been on sleeping pills most of the year. So Allison's been a breath of fresh air. Yeah.
In completely different situations. I do want to talk about Nolan Patrick because I want to get into that because we're going to talk about him during the press conference recap here. Chef, did you want to add anything there?
No, I think he seems to be a blend to me. If you're looking for two players that that the Flyers desperately need to replace on his team that they haven't had in several years, it would be Hartnell and Simmons. And I think he's a little bit of both.
Sure.
He goes into those dirty spots head first where Angels fear to tread, like Wayne Simmons did. He wouldn't back down. Wayne Simmons went in there. He didn't care how big you were. He went in there. And the way he just is all over the place reminds me of Hartnell. So, I mean, I think he's a healthy blend of the two. Yeah. And like Isiah said, reckless abandon, he needs to control a little bit of that. I know it's his first couple games. He's high on emotion, and I don't want to take anything away with that. It's something he's going to learn when to put his head down, when to go into a scrum, when to go into a corner. Mm-hmm. But as of right now, I think that's something you got to learn when to back off, because I think if we try to control that right now, I think it would ruin his game. Like how try and control Carter Hart's angles and his depth in net, kind of play with his head a little bit. I think, less is more. Let him figure it out. Warn him, but let him figure it out.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say, he's definitely a better skater than both Simmons and Hartnell as well. Yeah. He's got a lot smoother of a stride. He is a player, in case anybody listening wasn't aware, without those injuries. I mean, he was a Hobie Baker candidate, I think, and even in his sophomore year. So this is a guy who's always been kind of higher tier player. He was taken in the early parts of the second round. And him and Carter Hart were kind of taken right around each other, sandwiching Pascal LeBerge. So it's interesting to see it finally come to fruition. But it's not that surprising because he's already of age. He came to the NHL and he's already making a flash, and having a nice early portion of his career. But I did notice something that AV said, and I'll bring up the press conference real quick, is that, or maybe it was the press conference after the game, but he did say, it's great to see us win and the guys play well, but these are kind of meaningless games. And these are the type of games where young players do tend to excel, and veterans kind of take their foot off the pedal. Isiah, did you notice that at all? Do you think that some of the veterans maybe took their foot off the pedal?
I think, garbage time has its name for a reason, but a lot of these kids are going to have that extra bit of adrenaline. Maybe it's 50-50, but it's, I think Bill Meltzer said it, and it's something I've, kind of been aware of. You got to be careful about these late season games, or kind of like September baseball. Don't jump to a lot of conclusions, because you can get a false impression and you can start making plans in your mind, and you hope the management doesn't do this. They realize the context that the player is performing in, and you got to keep that in mind. And they, in a lot of ways, they do that to a fault, like, not giving enough credence to the bubble last year.
Yeah.
And when it actually was kind of revealing, like, you know what I'm driving at.
Absolutely. Isiah, your mic's still scratching up, buddy. I don't know if you can do anything about it, but we'll just so the viewers don't think we're ignorant to it and they don't think we're crazy, but I'm not kicking you out of the room or anything.
Yeah.
I can't hear you. There just for some reason there's a scratch coming in. Chef, did you want to add anything?
No, I think Isiah nailed it on a point there. I mean, like you take everything, especially these last. Is it once, even before they were mathematically eliminated, you could see that they were on the fringe, and it was very slim chance that they were going to make the playoffs. So you take everything with a little bit of grain of salt, but I also sit there and go, I'm not going to tell a kid that his tryout wasn't worth it. I really think that they made, York and Allison made it very hard for them to be ignored. Let's
Absolutely.
just say in camp. If that, I would say going into camp now, these guys are more likely to make the team than not make the team.
I would agree.
And I'm not saying that they should or they shouldn't. I'm just saying based off of what I've seen, and there were guys gunning for me. You could tell they wanted to make sure, especially the second Capitals game, they wanted to make sure that Cam York wasn't going to his head. They put more pressure on him.
Mm-hmm.
And to his credit, he responded. He was looked like I don't want to say flustered because he didn't look like he was flustered at all, but he might have been hurried in a couple of plays because he knew he had to. But then, and that was in the first part of the game. But once he settled in, in the second period on, it was back to silk again. So I think you take their progression in stride, like Isiah said, but you can also take it with a little bit of optimism too. That there's something a little bit more building there.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I do think their emergence does make the offseason a little more interesting. Because if you can essentially pencil Allison in, which I think they are, and if you can pencil Cam York in, which I think they are, it allows you to maybe have some mobility on the back end. You don't know exactly who you're going to lose in expansion, and having those guys in the wings kind of makes it a lot easier to deal with, to cope with. So I want to talk about the awards a little bit before we move into the press conference. I'll just state them out here real quick. The Yannick Dupree Award goes to JVR. The MVP Award goes to Coots. The Ashby goes to Provorov. The Gene Hart goes to Coots. And the Most Improved goes to Farabee. And then Giroux won the Toyota Cup. In my opinion, I think those are all pretty accurate. My whole thing is, though, I actually would give the MVP to Claude Giroux. I would not give it to Sean Couturier. I don't think that Couturier played poorly, but I think Giroux is the only reason this team didn't completely spiral down this year, emotionally. And again, Couturier he also played well. He has another gear in him as well, where I think Giroux really carried this team emotionally. Offensively, he scored some really big goals and had some really good points. And he obviously had that ridiculous pass to Couturier, even for that game against the Devils. It just seems like G still has it. And I think it should have been recognized a little bit more. And even in the press conference, which again, we'll go to later, it was referenced by Fletcher, particularly that he said Giroux, in his opinion, looked the best. And he said Couturier played well, but he didn't think that he played his best. Where Giroux kind of felt like he was always kind of clicking, even on the nights where the team looked really bad. He seemed like he was always kind of fighting regardless. Isiah, what did you think about that? The awards?
Well, this year is a tough year to get too wrapped up in it, but the point you're making is the only one that I would concentrate on even a little bit. I agree with you because I think Giroux is still the essential flyer. I mean, they have no power play at all without it. And
it's still been terrible.
And it hasn't been good at all. And of course, the PK is the big structure guy, but they didn't have structure this year
at all.
Most of the year anyway. So, I mean, it's maybe picking it mixed, but yeah, I would go with G, and I would agree essentially with your argument.
Yeah, Chef.
Well, I look at it like this: how many times, like you said, I can think of 6 games right off the top of my head where G seemed to carry the whole team. And late in periods, late in games, I saw a lot of players take shifts off especially in the last 15 games of the season, right after, I want to say the midpoint, I guess the trade deadline. Once I guess they kind of figured they were safe, I saw some guys take shifts off. I didn't really see G take a lot of shifts off. He always seemed, when he was on ice, you saw him. And it was a good presence. He's, as a captain, that's a good presence. I still think, and to this day, I know Kevin Hayes was getting a lot of flack for being a little bit slower, a little bit whatever, and he didn't have. But I've said it 100 times all season here, and I said he's hurt. And then when he said there was a little bit hurt, it wouldn't be surprised to me if he had like some kind of core injury and needed like maybe a minor surgery or torn whatever, the hip flexor or something. He just didn't have the right skating gait. He just didn't have the right reflexes. A core injury. I have a back problem, so I can tell when somebody's turning and it's like, oh, that's it. That's all I got. And last season when he'd stretch out his arm on the PK, it was like he was touching the blue line on the other blue line, because he had that wingspan. He didn't have his wingspan like that. That was the first sign to me. And then when his first step off, I mean, he's not the fastest skater, but he's got those long legs, and his first step off was always huge. It was like half the stride it was. So
good point.
Yeah. And I do agree though, but like with G, he didn't take a shift off. And I thought that he acted like a captain should, and he carried the team at points.
Yeah, I would agree. I think those are great points on Hayes. You didn't see the same power driving the net. You didn't see the same power on the PK. And, that's another thing. We were talking about the penalty kill. Like, that's Couturier's bread and butter. And our penalty kill just kept getting worse and worse. And it's not like he excelled on the penalty kill either. It's not his fault. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here picking on Couturier. But the same way people pick on the other guys for not driving it, I mean, I do feel like Couturier was kind of ignored by the fan base to be like, he also wasn't carrying the team, like the way he was in the previous thing. Again, I think it's a reflection of where this team was overall. Isiah, you want to add anything else? Because I want to go to the press conference.
Not really. I think we need to get the press conference because it kind of gives us a window into what they're thinking, and that's I'm dying to talk about that.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about that because it was a very interesting press conference. It was if anybody missed it, it was essentially just AV and Fletcher, and they went through a good amount of stuff. The biggest thing that I kind of took away from it is that I kind of took away the defense of a lot of stuff. Now, a lot of people might get angry at that, but anybody who listens to my podcast in particular, I essentially repeated primarily the entire season exactly what Chuck Fletcher has said. That conditioning was his team's biggest problem. He laid off of Nolan Patrick, which a lot of people don't want to hear, but I completely agree with him. And I think people pick on Nolan Patrick, to be honest with you, and I don't think that they're aware of it. And I think the kid is one of the youngest people on the team. And if you miss 12 months of training, and again, no training at all, that means no lifting, no skating, no nothing essentially for 12 months. Like, he barely did anything. He had some practices. There's no way that he was going to come in a season looking the other way. And what I thought was the most interesting thing is what AV said about preparedness for the regular season, where if you look at American players, they tended to be more prepared for this season than the Canadian players. And I think a lot has to do with the restrictions within the countries and what the options were moving forward. But I think it really showed. And I think this team's biggest problem was conditioning. They were not ready to play this season. And I do blame the coaching staff and the ownership on that one as well, because if you have limitations like that set, there should have been something done to account for that. There were no rinks set up in-house. There was nothing set up prior to that. As far as I can tell, that is where they kind of maybe shit the bed the most, is that they didn't anticipate that problem well enough, and maybe they left it too much on the kids to be ready. But we saw it. I mean, Sanheim, Myers, every single kid outside of Joel Farabee took either stagnated or took a step back, and they were not ready to play hockey this year. They just were not. We saw from the very beginning they won purely on talent, and as team got into their gear, the Flyers got worse and other teams got better. That tells me they were not prepared to play this year. And we saw that. We saw a lot of that. And that drove me nuts. All right, I'm going to go to Chef first on this one, and then we'll go to Isiah. Chef, do you have anything to add? And then I'll bring up some more examples as we roll through.
No, I think that was pretty self-evident. I mean, from what I've seen, like Farabee stayed here all summer, right? He stayed here. He didn't go home or anything. Like a lot of these players, and I get it, you have homes, but also too, when you needed the season could have started anytime. You know what I mean? And you needed to make sure that you were in shape. And I kind of blame the players too, because I don't want to take the blame away from that, because you need to keep yourself in game shape. I mean, it shouldn't be on the owners to provide. Like, you could be on a bike, you'd be rollerblading, or whatever you got to do to stay in shape. I mean, that's just my opinion there. I think it's the blame is split mutually, but
sure,
there are some players, Provy, Farabee, and they went above and beyond to make sure that they were ready. I think it was, G too. I mean, it's dedication. It's a dedication to your craft. I think some guys just, once the bubble happened, they saw their lives crumble a little bit with their families. And I think it was, and I don't blame them. I'm not trying to blame them there. But when you go back, you kind of overdid it on the other end. Maybe it's like when you go to the buffet, and it's like $9.99 and you can eat whatever you want and you eat too much, and it's the same thing. You overindulge when you're in the off season, and because you actually had an off season where you could go see your family, where you didn't have that when you were in a lockdown before. So I think, and I'm not just saying it's the Flyers, you could see evidences of this on other teams as well. It's everybody was in the same boat. You could see it everywhere. So it's going to catch up. And I will say this right now, it's going to catch up in the playoffs. When the playoffs are starting, you're going to see the teams putter out.
Well, we saw that.
Yeah.
Not to cut you off, but we saw that prior to this, right? The Flyers weren't ready for the playoffs.
No. So, and you're going to see other teams. And I just want people to know it just wasn't the Flyers too. You're going to see other teams in the playoffs here. Some of the players were more dedicated than others, and some because they were fired up, they wanted to be there. And and some are not. So it's not just the Flyers that were in that boat. I just want people to understand that.
True, very true. Isiah, you want to add?
I feel like Al Pacino's character is Glenn Ross. The moment Jonathan Price walks out the door.
Isiah, it's hard to hear you, buddy. I can't understand what you're saying. I'm sorry. I'm sure it sounds like you have something good to say too.
Yeah.
Can you record directly to the iPad instead of using your headphones or something?
I don't know how to do that. Unplug this one.
Yeah, try unplugging. Because I don't think people will be able to understand you. Oh,
that's perfect.
Now?
Oh yeah, that's just night. Yeah,
perfect, dude.
It's like night and day, dude.
Night and day. Okay. So I was going to say, I feel like Al Pacino's character in Glenn Ross. Jonathan Price has just left the building. Kevin Spacey's character,
great movie by the way,
just blew a sail for him and took him from the top of the board to who knows where. And after watching the parade of excuses today at the dais, at the Zoom calls, I feel like saying, well, I'll use the TBS. You freaking grunt. That's a TBS when they aired it.
I love this.
You have got to be kidding me. Canadian players. So in other words, I've got to go off here.
I do want to say Canada had really bad lockdowns. That's why I think they were saying it. But please continue. I do want to hear it.
Wait. So Connor McDavid would have had 130 points in 53 games instead of 100?
Maybe.
Is that it? Okay. So it's just the Flyers. The whole freaking league had to play under these conditions. Mm-hmm. Everybody did. And the Flyers are just like, they're looking. And, it's like, where are the excuses? I got an excuse. Can I use this one? Hey, boss, can I use this excuse? This is a joke. Okay? Listen, I know there are mitigating circumstances like Lindblom, is coming back from cancer. Okay? And there are some other situations. I agree with Chuck Fletcher, like he said at a press conference, I guess about 6 weeks ago. You got to be careful judging kids in a season like this. And I agree with that. I would grade on a little bit of a curve, and I would understand context. But let me
get it out.
Who is this team? Is this the team that in 2020, for about 6 to 8 weeks, looked like one of the better teams in the whole league? Or are they the team that started 2019, 2020, and then finished in the bubble, not really that impressive? And then what we saw this year, let's go back to 2019. I tweeted this out. In 2019, they were down 2-0 in 32 out of 82 games. This year, they were beaten by more than 4 goals 9 times. And here's a little item from Jordan Hall. Okay, since the start of March, in games after a victory, the Flyers have gone 1-11-1 and have been outscored 67-29. Now, that was minus the last 2 games.
Yep.
67-29, 1-11-1. This team has no excuses. And what we saw today is a bunch of executives, coaches, and a GM that magically wants to transport this team back to 2020 and act like this season didn't happen. What did AV talk about after the bubble? He talked about the vets and conditioning. So the vets came back and were conditioned. JVR was better. Claude Giroux was better. Okay, Coots got hurt, but he wasn't the target of his ire. And Jake had a decent year for whatever Jake is. Okay, so what are they trying to do as an organization? Because I come back to that. Are they just trying to put butts in seats and have a nice team that's going to finish in 3rd place and maybe win around and do that for about 5 years until they peter out that core group and go to another one? Or are they the kind of organization that they were before Ed Snyder passed away, where they were always looking to find a way to build towards a window of contention? And I mean, believe me, that had its pitfalls, as we saw, sure, which culminated with the Brizgalov disaster and the Carter Richard trades, whatever. This team is now 10 years fully into irrelevance. They're not relevant. And they seem to be tone deaf to what the fans are saying by giving us a lot of excuses. Some have some credibility, but you have to weight that. When weighted against the last 10 years, and even Chuck Fletcher said something to the effect of, we've been trying to build this thing with kids since 2014. I'm surprised that he came making a statement like that he would come to that final conclusion. That we just need this, just need that. No, this thing needs a fundamental change because these are pieces that don't fit together. This team doesn't know what to do. They have no identity. They have very little pushback. And then when things go in the crapper, they panic. And what did Justin Braun say at one point during the season? I've never seen a team fall apart or panic, something to that effect.
Yeah.
No.
No, I think that was actually really well said, and I think the intensity in which you say it is definitely justified. And here's the thing: is when I heard them saying that, I didn't necessarily hear them say as excuses. I saw it as disappointment. Like I saw AV's frustration being like, okay, here's my example: Mark Friedman. Okay, he was just dropped from this team. And if you look at what AV said about him, he said he didn't come into camp looking very good. And if you look at the success he had this year, it was only against us. And he played, like 5 games? He wasn't ready to play the NHL season. And I think to your point, I think these kids, they don't have an identity. They didn't put in the work in the offseason. Guys like Joel Farabee, who was more mature, comes from that U.S. program, he did put in the work. He did, and the other kids did not. I'll lay it out on Sanheim and Myers. They got pushed around this year. That's not supposed to happen.
Yeah, Sanheim got pushed around the playoffs last year, and that's one of his worst traits. I mean, it's something I think we might have to live with if he's going to be here. But I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's fine. No, you're not interrupting. It's not a problem. I think it's a great point. But again, they need to work through that. They're still in their early 20s. they have to recognize, hey, not only that, we're playing in the toughest division in hockey physically. They got hammered this year physically. And and to your point, they did not have the mental dexterity to rebound. Last year, they had Niskanen who could go out there and do it for them, right? Braun can't do it for them, right? They had Pitlick who could go out there. They had Nate Thompson. They had guys who were more physical and adults. These guys are not adults. They didn't come in and prepare the way they needed to. Guys like Nolan Patrick's confidence is way at the bottom. He's not going to get you out of it, right? So you're really left with Giroux, an injured Couturier, right? A JVR who's rebounding. And it's like, you look at the name Hayes, who didn't bring it. You look at the name. I totally agree with you. I think they deserve every bit of criticism that they get this year. They completely shit the bed. It was their fault. It's a player's fault. That's how I see it. And that's how I saw AV. Like, he was kind of holding back and he was saying, like, I expected you guys to do more, you know? And I do think Canada had restrictions. I think it's a great point, right? McDavid didn't have a problem. He does make $13 million a year. He can go find his own rink whenever he wants. A guy like Nolan Patrick doesn't have money like that. So I think there is kind of an element of that, is that the guys who had more money could afford to do those resources.
Yeah, but if Nolan Patrick picks up a phone and say, what do I do?
Well, he did. He went to Ryan White. But in that in particular, they told him to stay off the ice. We do have to... Nolan Patrick, I don't think people are being fair to him at all. I think his head injury is just as bad as Lindblom's cancer injury, not in the sense that the life critical element, but there's no way that he was going to be able to be prepared for this year.
Why was he in the NHL? Why did he not go to the AHL to recover his game? I mean, this is a comedy of errors. That's a good question. But Fletcher looked at the team that got pushed around, like they had their lunch money stolen from even by Montreal. They didn't deserve to win that series. They were outplayed 60% of the time. Versus the Islanders, they were outplayed roughly 75% of the time.
They got their butts kicked.
And now you subtract the guys you talked about, Pitlick and Grant. Well, Grant was a cipher in the playoffs, but Thompson represented fairly well, and this get in, and but like what? They're just going to crumble because a bunch of guys. It just,
That's what happens to young teams, though. They do crumble.
I'm almost apoplectic. I'm so tired.
No, I love it.
In 51 years of watching this team, I've never seen a lower period of crap for 10 freaking years.
Let me ask you this.
BS.
Let me ask you this, and then I want to let Chef talk. Let me ask you this.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No. I love this. When you saw them lose that 9-0 game to the Rangers, what went through your mind? Because all I thought is, this is the worst I've ever seen a Flyers team play ever. When they lost to Knobloch, when they didn't even have a coaching staff.
Well, I thought to myself, well, at least we're not going to get Tyrell Goulbourne called up next game. Okay, so we're spared that exercise. Right? We're spared that jackassery, but something had to happen, and they just sat there passively. You know, they made in their pants, raised their hand, and cried, "Mommy." I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, it's so unflyer-like. Look, this speaks to the problem of the Flyers since Comcast really took over. There is no heart, there is no soul of this team.
There's no soul
from management on down. They're a soulless corporate entity. They throw gritty at people, and that's supposed to distract people, and they make the kids happy, put butts in seats. And I think that's really their priority right now. Not that they don't want to win, but they don't have the passion of the Philadelphia fan. And I hope I'm bringing that tonight.
I love that. Chef, go ahead, man.
I was just going to say, it's funny how people, when you think about it, you don't realize that you underestimate how important the rah-rah guy is in that locker room.
Huge.
Right? I mean, it's huge. And I remember when I was on a previous, show before, and we talked about it. And I remember my partner there saying, these are professional athletes, Chef, they got to self-motivate. I said, think about it. There's always that one guy that can make you go crazy and make it like you sing a song or whatever and make you run through a freaking wall because he hypes you up so much. And I don't see that as G. I don't see that as Coots. I don't see that. Know what I see? I see an Allison guy who gets everybody fired up just because of his presence. That's what this team is missing. Mm-hmm. And I think if you look back on the teams that were kind of successful over the years, the previous years, there was always that dynamic personality that was in the room or on the ice or whatever that carried that team, that helped you motivate, that made you wanted to go out and lay it all on the ice. And I don't see that on this team anymore.
Isiah, you want to add something? You look like you want to add.
No, I keep things flashing in my mind, like all the different things they just don't get it. They don't understand. They have collected talent. They haven't built a team where the pieces fit together. So just go out there and say, well, we got to get defensemen, you got to get this guy. No. You need to put a team together and gain an identity. They have none. When he says be an effing Flyer, what does that mean, really? Nothing.
So let me ask you this. So what do you see? And I'm going to Isiah on this one because I like what you're saying, because I like the criticism, because they deserve it. Anybody who thinks, because I'm a pretty positive guy because I always look to the future, but I am very upset with this team. Extremely upset with the way they played this year. So I think everything you're saying is justified. They need to hear it, quite frankly. They need the criticism. So let me ask you, what do you think happened from the team that really, I mean, they were incredibly impressive going into the playoffs. We can say it's a long time ago. It is, right? They won back-to-back games against team. They instilled their will in the opposition every night. And they brought it. They might not have dominated every game, but they were never out of a game almost that entire season up until the playoffs. What do you think happened in between there? Because generally it's mostly the same players, you know? So what do you think happened that kind of just... like, where'd the fire go? Where'd the identity go from there? What do you think? Do you have a theory?
Yeah, I think it was lightning in a bottle. And I think it was the exception, not the rule. The rule over the last 10 years is what we've seen. And eventually it's just kind of... different
players over the past 10 years.
Yeah, but you know what? It's when the same thing happens, like they're never ready to play. They're always falling behind.
Horrendous.
They see the same pattern over and over again. And then you take away the physical element. Braden Shen is gone, which, listen, I'm not going to judge the trade, but I'm just saying Braden Shen is gone. Simmons is gone. Hartnell's gone. All of a sudden, spirit and pushback is gone. You can push the Flyers around. They're not playoff ready. They're not built for the playoffs in any way, shape, or form. There's not even a consciousness of that. And they think they're going to just put players together as if some guys in a room looking at analytics put a team together. It doesn't work that way. And I think that's a problem with them. They just, again, I got to come back to the same theme. They haven't really built a team. They have nice players. They don't have enough guys that want to shoot. Okay, so Allison's a guy. I got news for you. Allison's probably still a third-line player. Okay, and to have our hopes up high for some of these kids, it's one thing to have your hopes up high for a 23, 24, 25-year-old. That's one thing. But going for a 20 or 21-year-old player like Cam York, I still think it's a little bit much.
He's not going to play much like next year. He's not going to be playing 20-some minutes, you know?
Yeah, like Ivan Provorov was, listen, he came in, he had one more year in junior, but he came in when he was, 20? And look where he's at now. I don't think he was rushed or anything. I think Nolan Patrick was. I think we could go down the line and take an inventory of that. And certainly Carter Hart would fit in that category for me anyway. But a lot of these players don't end up the way you think they're going to. We have to start looking at getting different veterans with winning pedigree. You saw what Niskanen did.
I completely agree.
And start giving up some kids here and there, replacing some veterans who have this quit factor, like I talked about. 32 out of 82 games. They were down 2-0 in 19, and this year getting bombed out 9 times. You have to start removing elements. Even if they're good players, there's something obviously missing.
Sure.
When teams show up to one last thing, I'll go to Chef because I'm hogging the mic. When teams show up to play the Flyers, honestly, do you really think they're like, oh, damn, I got to play against this guy. I got to play against... No, the Flyers don't have any of those guys, and other teams seem to have a lot of them. And that's a problem. The Islanders have a lot of guys like that. You don't want to play against. Boston still has guys like that. Unless you can outskill teams like Tampa can. All right. And even they had to add grit. If you can't wow people, Absolutely. You have to have that mixture of skill and grit, pushback, and attention to detail. Flyers don't have any of it.
I totally agree with the addition of grit. Every team needs it. Tampa Bay went out and spent a lot to get some too. Chef, please go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to emphasize on that too. Look at it. What wins playoff games? Goaltending and you know, that grit, that defense. It's you need that, and when it comes down to the playoffs, it's defense wins games. We always talk about that. The goaltending, you ride a hot goalie is for a couple rounds, but then the defense has got to catch up to it eventually. You can't just keep going loosey goosey. You need that shutdown. You need that physicality, and that's what this team is lacking. And it's sad. I look at Pitt like with somebody like Pickle. He was always hard in on the forecheck. When the Flyers played last, I think the difference was, and I don't know. This is where I slightly disagree with Isiah about it, but I'm not going to say it was lightning in a bottle. I think there was something good going on there. But I think they had a good mix of players. I mean, people always said, oh, no, Grant's playing again, or, oh, no, Thompson and this and that. Those guys, they carry some weight. They carry something that Konecny doesn't have it. I see Konecny disappearing game. When he goes to check somebody, he takes himself out of the play. He doesn't know how to check somebody. You look at him in that game, was it last night? He went and checked somebody, and then by the time the Flyers got the puck and came back up, he was still in the zone. Like you need to be able at this level, and I think that's where a lot of this is going, especially for some of these players that are left. Is when you're doing, you need to, like they said, they're chasing the puck. You need to go to where it's going to be, not where it's been, and there's not enough. And I always thought that when Hextall drafted and when these guys were drafted, that their hockey IQs were better than this. And I think majorly a lot of that is being exposed right now.
Yeah. Well, with young guys, it's easy to do that. I mean, I talk about this all the time, and it's a factor that frustrates us, but that's the reality. And I've said this before, and I think the press conference kind of proved this, that I think Chuck Fletcher knew this team wasn't ready this year. And I don't think he's allowed to tell people that. And I don't think people really want to hear that. But I think he sat the season out.
It was a stall year.
That's
what I think.
Yeah, I think he saw the amount of risk with the amount of games played. He saw that Niskanen bailed on him last minute. He saw the lack of veterans. And he went, well, we have enough talent. To your point, I don't think he knew it was going to be this bad. I don't think he was expecting this bad. But I think he expected him to take a step back. Because if you just look at the amount of young players, it's like every GM knows that young players get their butts kicked. One of the thing I hate the most is that this is a young man's game. There's zero proof that this is a young man's game. It's a young man's game because they can't afford to pay the veterans anymore. That's it. Mm-hmm. But if you look about it, the older players who are more physical, like even a guy like Sam Morin, he's still too young to really be the tough guy of your team. A 30-year-old guy is not, or 32-year-old guy is not that intimidated by Sam Morin just because he's 6'7". Like he's kind of a kid still, like there is an intimidation factor. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. Justin Braun's not getting intimidated, right? Claude Giroux's not getting intimidated. Even Jake Voracek, but we need more of them. And even the guys that we're listening, like I like JVR, right? But is JVR really your fight back type of guy? It's not that he's soft, but he's not Wayne Simmons. He's 6'3" big, but he's not battling for space. We don't have those guys out there who are dictating space. Like when the Flyers had those championship teams, right? And you guys would probably even remember this better than I would, right? Because I wasn't even around for that stuff. But what was the thing? If you touched Bobby Clark, you're getting punched in the face. Like you were scared to touch him. And we do not have that element on this team. And I hope Sam Morin's here, and I hope he grows into that guy. I think the Flyers do need to go out and get physicality, like you're saying, need to get some veteran leadership on this team. So when this team does spiral, it's not Justin Braun that has to go out there and play with Ivan Provorov. And I love Justin Braun. He's not a top pairing defenseman. No. You know what I mean? He can't.
And it's not Oscar Lindblom that has to fight or Nolan Patrick.
Exactly.
So what does that tell you?
Well, I like that they fought for themselves, like when Sanheim stood. But again, it shouldn't get to that point. And that's why I understand people's frustration. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Shep. Do you want to say something?
Well, I was going to say before, like what you were saying. Granted, like when we talked about the bully days, it was old time hockey, and I agree. Like, okay, that there's no place for that in hockey anymore, and I understand that, and I accept that. But what there is place in place for hockey, like the situations like what happened between the New York at Rangers and the Capitals,
Right.
where, okay, the proper punishment was probably not dished out. And what happened? You had guys policing their own games, and that's where look, you don't need a Probert or, somebody of that caliber anymore in this league. But what you do need are players like Wayne Simmons. I hate him because probably he's not a Fire Wilson, but along those lines, he can play and he's got the mitts, he's got the chops for it.
Sure, Blake Coleman, another
Vander
guy.
Kane, got guys like that are scrappy. Reeves, these guys. Mike Richards at a point. He was never. I mean, he wasn't the best fighter, but he was never afraid, and you knew he was going to be like a chihuahua on your leg. It wasn't going to let go. So, but I look at it like there's still room for people in this league that can actually stop the game from getting to that point where you have to have three guys drop the gloves. Okay, you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. All right, let's
Niskanen,
do it.
Niskanen, I would say he didn't fight, but physically, think about the battles he had with Brad Marchand last year.
Yep. You knew you were going to pay a price if you went into the corner for the puck.
Right.
And I think that's at the be and that goes me back to what I was talking about with Pitlick, Grant, Thompson. Lawton was actually a lot better at it last year. When they were forechecked in the other zone, in the defense, in the offensive zone, when they were forechecking, they made you pay to get out of your own blue line, and that's what the team doesn't have anymore. And that's what I'm talking about. No, like Isiah said, nobody's afraid to play us.
Correct.
And it's not and it's not like I said, you don't need to have an enforcer, but you do need to have the guys that can take the game and stop it from getting to a point where you're going to have an all-out brawl.
And this is what I wanted to, and Isiah, I want to hear more from you because I like the stuff you're saying. I don't always agree with all of it to that level, but I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying as well. I do think the conditioning plays into that as well, because you talk about conditioning. It's not just, are they like the faster team? It's, can you drive through your opposition? Like all of those battles, like how tired are you at the end of that 40-second shift? Like, are you able to really push through that guy? Are you able to power to the net after you got around everybody? I can tell you Joel Farabee had it this year, and he's not a big dude.
No, but when have the Flyers been the kind of team that won puck battles on a consistent basis?
It honestly has been, I would say, the Mike Richards era. And that's what I meant about Richards. He was not a fighter, but he never quit on any battle. I mean, you think about Richards, think about that iconic goal he scored in the playoffs against the Canadiens. You knew we were going to win that game. He drove through their two players and their goalie. He was unstoppable mentally.
It's will.
Yes.
Will. This team lacks will and has lacked will for a very long time.
Kids don't have it. That's what I worry about. That's why when I see all these young guys, again, I love them. They're all talented, but majority of them don't have it. Joel Farabee, I think, is captain material. Again, that program, that U.S. program, is very special. That kid is captain material. He has it. Okay, but most kids do not have it. You see, Nolan Patrick has struggled. He's down on himself. Travis Sanheim has struggled. He's down on himself. Myers struggled, down on himself.
But you know what, though? We're not here to worry about them. We're here to put a team on the ice. So some of those guys need to go. So
they'll have to do something. They'll have to do something.
Yeah. So I mean, it's good to worry about them if they're on your team and you're moving forward with them. But at some point, you look at the roster and changes need to be made. And
here's the thing though. We have the assets to do it. We have everything to do it. That's why I kept thinking Fletcher's holding back. He didn't do anything. I even thought, I was like, where's the fourth line center? I thought in the offseason, I was like, you didn't go out and get a fourth line center? It would have been so cheap. He didn't do anything.
Well, he did almost nothing. He went out and spent $3 million on that waste product, Gustafsson.
Who, again, had no physical element to his game at all.
It never made any sense. So maybe that feeds into your theory about he was kind of mailing it in.
I think he did.
Well, I got a question then. Do you think, because Niski not coming back and a quick signing with Braun and a quick signing with Haig, right? and all of a sudden signing with that. Do you think something was in the deal to move one or two of these defensemen, and it kind of just fell apart? And now, oh God, I'm stuck with Gus too. Gus and Ghost, essentially, a lower version of the other. And
yeah, I posited that early on. I said the only thing that made any sense is that they had a deal for somebody, probably Ghost, and it fell through. The idea that you could have both of those guys on the ice or on the same team was ridiculous.
Well, it's possible, but I honestly hate ripping on Gustafsson so hard because I respect NHL players, but that guy can't play defense. I mean,
he's
Ghost
a European player.
Like you see the way Ghost plays. He can play. When he's on his game, he can play. Gustafsson is only effective in the offensive zone. If he's in the defensive zone, there's no. I'm pretty patient with guys, and I had no interest in watching Gustafsson play whatsoever. I was ready to move on from him from preseason because I was like, he can't play D. He doesn't fight for the puck in the corners. And again, it was an element that we have on this team that's been missing all year. That did not help. So that's why I'm being kind of harsh with Chuck Fletcher. Like, I like him a lot, but he definitely did not make the moves in the offseason to improve this team. And I don't think he's stupid. So I asked myself why. And I think back to his time in Minnesota where he got hit by the expansion draft, and I want to talk about that next. He got hit by that really hard. He went out and he signed these big players, right? He went out and got Parisi, again, captain material, went out and got Ryan Suter. He knew what the flaws were his team was, and then he got hit with expansion. He traded assets to try to keep stuff. I think he was kind of like, all right, I don't want that to happen again. Maybe I wait till after expansion. This is going to be a crazy season. I got a bunch of kids. I don't even know if they're training overseas, right? I don't know how great our communication is with them. I already know that AV doesn't know how to handle this type of stuff, which he kind of admitted. He's like, I didn't even have a full season here yet. He didn't know what to do over COVID. They didn't know how to communicate with one another. No, they didn't know how to practice. And this is what I kind of saw is like, maybe they don't want to really tell us that they were like, we didn't really think we were going to be that good this year. It's hard for us to admit, but it's like, he didn't invest in the team at all at any point. Even in the preseason, he never invested in the team. He let Niskanen retire, right? And then he was kind of like, well, Band-Aid.
He sat on that for a month. And he knew.
Exactly. So did he think about it?
And he had not signed Haig nor Braun. Now, Braun came back and was like, I called him like an unsung hero this year. And then he signed Gus. So what do you got? You got 1.3. So it's like $6 million right there.
Yeah.
He didn't want to commit and get involved in a deal with somebody like Nate Schmidt, which you knew there was going to be fallout.
Okay, that's a great point. Why didn't he want Nate Schmidt? Because Nate Schmidt has a no movement clause. And the only reason he didn't want him is because expansion. It's almost like every decision he made was around expansion. Do you see what I'm saying? And maybe it's possible,
stupid. Things change, because right now, both JVR and Ghost have more value coming out of this season than they did before.
Yes.
In fact, I forget
definitely
the guy's name. Ryan, what is it?
Gilbert?
Clark or something like that for The Athletic did an article with Charlie O'Connor, and they were kind of playing armchair GM, like who is Seattle going to take and all that. The guy basically predicted it could be Ghost, but it probably is going to be JVR. So,
they'd have to eat cap on him is my only concern, just because of the finances of literally the world, right? Just the fact that the league wasn't very profitable. That's where I was like, do the Flyers even worry about some of the more expensive players where they're like, I think it's going to be Ghost because he's more affordable. And he had a rebound year. Let's talk about expansion, actually. So that was kind of my thought is I think they might expose Voracek. I think there's a good chance. He's very expensive, right? Yeah. But I will say this, he sells jerseys. And he does sell jerseys. He's a bigger name than all the other guys. He'll move jerseys for sure. He's very popular in Czech Republic, or Czech, old school, in Czech, So he will move jerseys. He'll make them some money in return. And there's only $1 million difference between him and JVR. JVR is not selling jerseys. So that's kind of what I was thinking about is like Voracek.
He has an extra year on his deal where JVR's got only 2 years. And that's a big deal too.
That's a great point. So, but that's all I'm saying is that money is going to be at play here, right? Like how expensive guys are because we don't know how profitable the league will be too. I still think that they're going to want Ghost, and I think it's perfect for the Flyers. Not that they want to get rid of Ghost. I think they actually least want to lose Ghost maybe at this point, but they have Cam York. They have Zamula. So in their mind, they're like, take some money off our cap. We're going to use it to bring a new guy anyway, and we want to lose that cap space. And Fletcher is not going to spend assets to keep a player this time like he did last time. He's not going to do. He's going to take whatever you want. I'll adjust later. And I think that's the biggest difference.
I just want to lose the biggest contract. Go ahead, Chef.
Yeah, Chef. Go ahead first, and then Isiah.
I was thinking for my sake, I think that actually you give up a Morgan Frost or somebody or a Nolan Patrick as an incentive to take Voracek. I think with Nolan Patrick, you can probably sign him on the fairly cheap still because he really didn't show anything this year.
You wouldn't have to pay much at all for him.
Yeah, exactly. So you're getting...
He's got no leverage at all.
Yeah. So I would think you throw some guys in there and hopefully they take Jake. And if you can't, I see the only thing I think it's going to be JVR because let's look at Ghost. Is Ghost a Ron Francis kind of guy?
No. That's a good point, but he can walk in immediately and run your power play. If you're talking about roles, all three of those guys can have a role on your team day one, but it does depend on who else is available, right?
Yes.
It's not just our players available.
Exactly.
Right. The Seattle writer thought that there's not going to be a lot of premium forwards available. And they're going to look, they have to make a cap floor. They can't,
right.
They can't be, like Carolina barely making it, but now Carolina has to pay their players. But I think that, we'll have to see. It's something I'm not worried about. I do think they'll probably hold off on a trade, and it might cost them a little bit more. If they are going to make a trade for a defenseman, they probably hold off until after expansion. There might be one price before expansion and then another one after, depending on what they want to do because of the protection scheme. What is it? It's 4-4-1 or 7-3-1. Like 7-4.
They're gonna go with the 7-3-1 most likely.
But if they got a better price for the defenseman before, because it could be leveraged that way. I don't know.
Yeah, the one thing that Jamie Baskow and I have talked about quite a bit is the situation with Arizona, right? They're already broke. They can't pay anybody. They can barely pay their staff. So if I'm a coach, look at the one move that I still love. I brought it up over and over again, so I repeat myself, but the Niskanen trade was brilliant. It was really brilliant. For all they did was eat $1 million of Gudas's contract, and they got Gudas out, which again he's a decent bottom pairing guy, but Niskanen is clearly a clear-cut above player and a locker room guy, the whole thing. He's about $7 million if you add on the extra money you ate. You're looking at a team like Arizona. I'm not saying this is possible. I bring it up just because it's an example, but they're broke. And I say, okay, I'll give you Ghost. You give me OEL. I'll take the $8 million on OEL, and you take the $4.5 million on Ghost. And I'll take the cash off your hands. Like that. That's the type of deal where I'm like, can I try to rip a team off who's in a bad position? I don't know if that's the case, but
he has trade control. And he didn't want to go anywhere besides Boston and maybe one other place.
True.
Why would he want to come here?
Well, it depends. Go ahead, Chef. You want to say something?
No, I was about to say the same exact thing. So yeah.
Yeah. And again, that's why I only use it as an example. These things are impossible to predict. The only reason we say Arizona, and usually we're wrong. I do want to make that clear because nobody saw the Niskanen trade happening. You don't usually know about it. But we did notice that there was a pattern of the Flyers scouting Arizona heavily. Fletcher did say he knew what teams wanted from them and what they wanted from other teams. He said that at the trade deadline. And again, I'm only looking at their financial situation where they're like, we got to move somebody. So maybe it's not even OEL. Maybe it's Jalmerson or something, right?
Yeah. I think, too, if you look at it,
or something,
and if this is a dump year, like we think it might have been, like a stall year, whatever you want to call it.
I didn't expect it to be, so.
But looking back on it, like some of the signs are there, but I can see that, like stuff fell through because of COVID, because of expansion or whatever it was. Remember, those, the same players that they wanted last year are now going to be still there this year, and deals can still be made. And especially now, think about like Isiah said, after the draft, because I don't think there's going to be a lot of play before the draft. I think, you got expansion to 21st, my birthday to 22nd, and then you have the regular draft to 23rd, and it's all my birthday weekend, so it doesn't matter. It'll be partying galore. But I'm thinking that the difference is you're going to see a lot. I think everybody is waiting for that point, and I think we'll just see lots of, as my boss would say, lots of littles. You're going to see lots of players moving, and it's all going to be catch-based moves, kind of like the trade deadline. But I think you're going to see some power moves here and there because, Seattle is going to do most of the damage for some people, getting clear in their space and getting rid of players. So all the little moves that are going to come afterwards, because now you picked my team apart. I had to do this. I moved this around. And I just think that you're going to see a lot more action after that.
Yeah, the Panthers are an example of a team that definitely suffered from expansion too. And look, they took them a year or whatever, and they turned it around. It's like I feel like expansion does hurt some teams. I think Fletcher was very scared of it, and maybe too scared. But again, he lost his job essentially, in my opinion, because of expansion. He got torn apart in expansion. He gave up assets for. I think he kept Vatanen. It's not a guy you need to give up assets to keep. Not that different from Ghost, right? It's like we have so many assets on this team that it doesn't even make sense to not trade some of the young guys. You're not going to be able to keep them all. It's not going to happen.
And a lot of them there's only a couple of them that are higher level, and there's question marks about them. Like Frost still might need more development time. We don't know what
he lost a lot of time too.
He lost a lot of time. If you want to make that argument for Patrick, you could certainly make that argument for Morgan.
Sure. Absolutely.
Don't make the same mistake twice.
And Lazinski also is losing a bunch of time. And this is what I think is key. We cannot go into next season. Like, I love Cam York. He cannot be like, oh, we have Cam York coming in there, so everything's going to be fine.
No.
You know what I mean?
No.
Even look at Jack Hughes, what happened in New Jersey. And how talented is that kid? You cannot do that to kids. You have to have veteran talent added to this team for the will to beat the opposition. Guys who will not get intimidated, which we did.
And like we had Russ Cohen on our last show.
I love him.
And he was saying he wants Cam York to start out in the AHL next year.
That's
make
fair.
him play his way to the NHL just by being supposedly like too good for the league. I mean, don't count on these kids. It's like playing that same record over and over again.
Yes. And especially with the D that's so young. It's like you're going to add Cam York to a group of guys who are already 23, 24, 25. I mean, you guys are older, right? I'm 30, going to be 34 soon at the end of this month. Like, I remember what I was like in my mid-20s. You could have made fun of me and I would get butthurt. Like, literally, the way that you can get thrown off mentally, you're not strong enough mentally. Show me a young team that's won a Stanley Cup. That's why I hate that line. This is a young man's game. It doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. No. You have to have veterans to win a Stanley Cup. You have to have iron will to beat teams. They're going to punish you. You know what I mean?
The Flyers' biggest weakness.
Yes. And even think about Nolan Patrick, his rookie year. He fought David Krejci. Okay? David Krejci is like half his size. Krejci got the best of him in that fight. Patrick is still bigger, stronger guy. It did not matter. Dad's strength is very real. And it's not just a physical thing. It's a mental thing as well. Mm-hmm. And I think this team definitely lacked it this year. And I think that's why they get their butts kicked completely. All right. Anything you guys want to add on expansion? Then we'll move in. I want to talk a little bit of the Phantoms before we close up.
No, that's it.
Nah.
Okay. So let's talk about the Phantoms a little bit. First of all, the Flyers signed a couple guys I brought up last time. Ali Lishkill and Elliot Denoyer both got signed from an ELC. I would imagine maybe both of them are coming to the Phantoms next year. This team, a shame that there's no Calder Cup. Zayd Wisdom, a guy that we probably would really like on this team when he's ready, right? We're talking about that physicality. He's definitely got that. Forrester is looking like a real player. He's already a goal scorer at the AHL level. There's a lot of talent down there. It's a shame we can't play for the Calder Cup. What do you guys think about the Phantom success? Do you think it's at least a sign that the team that they're doing well. Like even guys like Sandstrom is doing well, who struggled before, and Ustimenko's been out all year, right? And we still have other guys like Ersan who's going to be ready, right? And we have Fedotov who's over, he's killing it in the KHL, right? What do you think about the Phantoms? Do you think at least it's a good sign to see guys like Zamula and Wiley all coming into their own? Where last year the Phantoms were not good at all. Isiah, I'll let you go first on that one.
Okay. Well, it's always best when your minor league team does well because the highly drafted players are driving the success because of what that portends for the big club. And after all, that is their main function, right? So that's what's really been good. And to get what they have had out of the production out of Foster, Wisdom looks like a kid who's going to be a professional player.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a fourth round pick.
Yeah, the steal.
That looks like he should have been drafted at least 20 or 30 spots higher. And to see Sandstrom finally, after all these years of injury and ineffectiveness, learning the North American game, to see him get a solid spot. I don't expect Alex Alain to be here in the organization next year.
We should talk about goalies too, actually.
And I want to see him to see if he's got it, if he's going to be someone who could eventually emerge as a backup candidate or even a challenger, a minor challenger to Carter Hart. But again, that would be down the road. I'd love to have a situation like the Flyers had years ago when they had Pelle Lindbergh, then they had Bob Froese, and then they had Ron Hextall. I mean, those were fun dates. And that was the last time the Flyers had a run of goaltenders who were starter or at least solid backup quality. And I think that's the real good news story, is that they're promoting and that we're not counting on guys like Connor and the minor league stars to lift them up.
Yeah, it's well said. Chef.
I like it because I look at the Phantoms and I see stuff that's not on the professional level, is it? Right? The grittiness that we were talking about, that nastiness, that snarl. I mean, you got a couple players down on the Phantoms that have that, and it's not on his team. So I'm glad that, okay, maybe Hexy drafted some guys that might have been a little soft here and there and all that. But the guys that I think that Chuck has drafted have a little bit of edge to them. And I'm happy to see that in the minor leagues because I think – and it's funny because the ones that Isiah was talking about were the guys – that have that little bit of edge to their game. And that's good. That's good. I think that's something to look forward to, that even, if we can pick up a couple of veterans and in a year or two, when these kids are ready and they have their snarl on and they come up, it'll help them blend in at a better level and they'll address a need. I think what a lot of the players, and I think I'm going to say Joel Farabee is the only one that's done it successfully in the last 5 years. When you come up and you get your shot, you make yourself important to the coach. Mm-hmm. And what did he do? When he said he wasn't getting power play time, he goes, put me on a penalty kill last year. He said that. I'll do it. I'll play. I'll do the PK. He's fast. He made himself important. He got other talents and I guess showed off some of his skills that normally wouldn't have been seen because he would have been riding 8 to 10 minutes a game. But he made himself important. And I think that some of these young kids, if they can do that and make themselves important and still have their edge to their game, I think they could make an impact in a year or two.
I like that. And again, it's like, it goes back to what we were saying, right? We don't want to rely on them. We want them to just trickle in naturally around a good team, right? So when a veteran goes in free agency, right? A guy like Allison just steps up, right? That's what we want to see. Right, or Ghost gets taken expansion, and then Zamula or York comes in, but they play 15, 16 minutes a night, not 21 minutes a night, right? To get pummeled by Patrice Bergeron in front of the net. Like, that's not the type of stuff we want to see, right? We want them to come in a supported system. And that's what sucks for a guy like Phil Myers, right? Is that he had Niskanen above him, right? For an entire season, and it definitely helped. And then all of a sudden, Niskanen was gone on that right side. And it's just like a whole different situation. It just snowballed from there. All right, so let's talk about the last topic because I forgot to bring it up. Brian Elliott said that he wants to come back. He's going to be 37, I believe, by the time next season starts, or at least he can be entering the age 37. It's pretty old for a goalie. Having said that, he's played well this year. Alex Lyon had some moments. He obviously had a great save this year, and he played okay, but he didn't show much progress. He's already getting up there, right? There's a good chance they're going to let him walk, even though I love his personality. He's intelligence-wise, brilliant. And I could see him coming back here and being part of the organization. I would hire him as a coach. I just don't know if he's going to be the NHL guy here, or even a number 3 or definitely not number 2, right? Going by Fletcher's statement, I feel like they're going to look for another goalie this year. And I don't think Elliott's going to be the guy. Maybe he'll be the guy. They like him. But I think they're going to look for another goalie to be like, okay, we want somebody a little bit better, or maybe a guy who can be number 1 if Carter Hart has another down year. Which again, he's a kid. He was way ahead of schedule to begin with, right? He wasn't necessarily supposed to be put in the position he was in to begin with. This is kind of what we were talking about, right? Yeah. And Elliott did his part, though. I will say that. He did his part. But they're probably going to look for 2 new goalies. There's a good chance of that. Chef, I'll go to you first, and then Isiah, I want to close on you. What do you think about the goalie situation? Do you think there's any chance that Elliott comes back, or Lyon? And is there anybody out there that interests you?
I don't think that Lyon comes back. As much as I like him personally, and he's great personality, great outlook on the game. He's a very up guy. I think there's like a 25% chance that Moose comes back, and I say that only because when they looked around, they ran numbers, I guess. You could probably get Moose maybe for 1.5 again, maybe 1.25. So unless some other moves get made where you free up space, are we looking really to spend $3 million on a possible 2A or 1B goalie? And I think based on other things, I mean, I know we have said, but I think Isiah brought it up, a couple other players, Bernier, I think, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's in the realm of $3 million, I'm guessing, right? Somewhere around there. And I just don't know if they're ready to do that yet on a bank. Now you have I know you just rattled off a whole bunch of goalies, and I would like to see some of them maybe try to step up, but I don't think it's realistic. I don't think they can make that jump. I think they need more time in the AHL. I would just say you might be stuck with Moose one more year, and I'm not totally upset at that unless other huge moves are made to clear out space.
Right. Isiah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that would be another disaster. You saw that he couldn't. Sorry, man. I just you can't keep doing the same old thing, man, because he can't handle volume. If you knew that Carter Hart, if we're going to have 82 games next year, and Carter is going to take 50, and you can spot the games perfectly, and you don't need Elliott to play 4 or 5 games in a row for an injury, but that's not realistic. And Elliott hasn't been healthy except for this year. It's great. He did a good job. I wanted Talbot because I was concerned going forward. I wanted to lock down that position. Talbot did a good job this year. Was it Minnesota?
I think so. I actually forgot to look it up.
Yeah, but I mean,
I'll look it up
fine.
right now.
But I mean, he's doing a good job wherever he's at, and he wanted a starting spot. So good for him. Yeah, Bernier, somebody along that line. So if Carter falls down, they can take him out of the lineup. Bernier can start a couple games. And that is so important that they have, plan B in goal, because they can't go through this again. You can't keep making the same mistakes. What was it in 19? 19, Hextall comes in, counting on Michael Neuvirth to stay healthy. That didn't work out too well.
That was a huge mistake.
It really started the sequence of events, which ended up in him getting fired.
Yeah,
now, this past year, we didn't really come up with a facsimile for Niskanen, and that had a domino effect on this team. Too much of one, and I can't take that as an excuse. So next year, hopefully they've learned as an organization that sometimes you have to overpay to nail down really important positions, particularly looking back and knowing Carter Hart was probably rushed, should not have been playing in the NHL as soon as he was. And I think we're seeing some reverberations from that, some fallout from that. So he has a fallback year. This happens. A lot of goalies in their early 20s have that rough 2 or 3 year period. I think it happened with at least 1 year with Carey Price. So they have to go out and get a goalie, even if it's a little bit more expensive than they would like to spend. And which brings me back to the expansion. They have to get rid of more than the $4.5 million of Ghost. It's an imperative. And if it costs you a player, the Flyers have tons of bottom 6 players that they can give in addition as an incentive. They have to clear cap space. At a minimum, they have to get rid of JVR and Ghost to try and make things happen.
I truly believe that they're trying to get rid of JVR because I noticed he was very absent from that press conference. And he played well this year.
He did.
And they didn't talk about him. And that tells me that I don't think they see him as part of the future plan. I don't think Hextall made a mistake to sign him, but I don't think he was what we really needed. And I think he signed him to satiate the fans. He wasn't really like a Hextall type of pickup because he doesn't play a two-way game. That's not Hextall's thing. He's not the most physical guy. That's also not our thing, right?
They wanted Stasny. They wanted
a center, right?
But they didn't want to give him an extra year,
right? Which is,
and then apparently
doesn't even make sense.
Like Dave Scott got in Hextall's ear and said, "Well, what about a guy like JVR?" And
that's what I'm saying, and we don't want to make decisions like that. That's not how we want to make decisions, right?
It's kind of like we need a goalie and pound your fist on the table, and you end up getting Ilya Brizgalov and sending Bob out of town.
Yeah, and I honestly, I think. This offseason, I don't like you mentioned Nolan Patrick. I don't think you have to give up a guy like Nolan Patrick or Frost to get rid of cap space. What you probably will have to do, though, maybe give up a lower tier prospect, but realistically, you're going to be giving up draft picks because that's a huge value right now. Teams want to save money. They're going to want to save money. So if you're going to take on $7 million, you might have to move your second round pick. Maybe even your first. To get rid of JVR's contract. That might be something we're looking at. And in a crazy draft year like this year, where so many players haven't been able to play, that's kind of where I would be looking. I don't necessarily want to give my first, but I would be trying to shed salary cap too, because there are things that this team needs. And JVR I can replace with Wade Allison, in my opinion, or even just some of the other names I have, or a guy like Farabee. And it's not the same, but again, he's not the type of player that is going to make or break this team, JVR. He's just not. He's not exactly what we need.
No, he's not a will player. And look, if they take a step back, but they have an identity and a new direction, I think the fans will be like, it's okay. Okay, it's okay because
there's no taking a step back from what we've done this year. Yeah, but even this year, we dropped so low in the second half of this year.
Not necessarily like the record might be very similar, and people think, well, gee, they didn't make any progress. But if you see new elements, and you could see it starting over again. I've watched so many seasons of hockey. There is nothing to build on here. Nothing. The veterans are exiting their prime, and the kids aren't ready. It's kind of betwixt and between. Frankly, I'm more in the blow it up category. Maybe not quite, but I am. Okay. I don't think they're going anywhere. They'll never win anything with Jake and G. And I don't know if I want to.
You don't have faith in Giroux? You don't have faith in Giroux at all? I understand
it's not like that. It's like it's too late to salvage it. So how many kids are you going to trade to salvage it for them, or how many veterans are you going to try to make a run in the next couple of years? I think that is the real dilemma. That's a whole other show's worth of material.
Go ahead, Chef. You want to add something?
That's a show in itself. Like, what do you do with G? I mean, because there's so many possibilities. But I think he's right. I mean, you can't really get any worse than this year. Than this past year, but like to say what he's saying about an improvement, like he's saying it could be the same record, but how many times did we get blown out by 4 goals and then by 9-0? And that's saying you knock away those games where you're in it to the end and you're dogfighting. and you lose by 1 goal or 2 goals, and the one's an empty netter because you left your heart and your blood on the ice. That's what he's talking about. Yeah, you can see it building. Yeah, and I totally agree with what you said there. And I knew what you meant as soon as you said it, that it's not going to be blowout games where, how many 9-goal games did they give up this year? What, 4, 5?
No, the 9 times they were beaten by more than 4 goals. 4 goals or more.
Yeah, so
they got blown out way too many times this year.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's what I mean. Like, if I see take those blowouts and make them 4-3 or 5-3 games, where one of them's an empty goal, I'm happy. I want to see progress, and that's how I judge the progress, not necessarily the schedule. Like Isiah said, the what do you call it? It's going to be the same wins and losses, around the same wins and losses, but production for the individual players and as a team will be different.
So I will say this will probably drive you both nuts. I definitely don't think we should blow up the team, and I think this is reversible to next year, and I think it'll be so annoying that this team probably will turn it around next year. And then you're going to go, what the hell happened? And I think that, and again, if you look at the record of past 10 years, that's exactly what they've done to us every year. That you're like, they were supposed to be great this year. And then all of a sudden they shit the bed. And you're like,
to what end? Where's the window of contention? That's how you get
I agree.
Caught in that gully. You'll never
I totally agree with you. And we can't be a middle of the road team. That is the worst thing you want to be. Here's the one thing I will say. We have no shortness of young players. It's not like when we were that bubble team with an empty cupboard, right? And you guys know what I'm talking about. We had no one coming up. We had no first-round picks. We had nothing. Now we just have it in stride. So even though we are kind of middle of the road, if we want to go out and get a superstar, we can do it today. We might have to overpay, but we can do it. We could trade Morgan Frost, our first-round pick, trade a young prospect, go get a superstar. We can do it right now. That might be that. I think is what we're looking at right now.
Well, because they don't have any blue chip prospects. They don't have anybody who's going to be a perennial all-star.
I mean, did you think that Joel Farabee was a blue chip prospect?
No, there was a good, solid prospect,
but he is a blue chip prospect. Right, he's most likely on path to do that.
Yeah, but I mean. It's 1 year.
I'm not trying to be cocky, but I anticipated that with him. I expect that with York as well. We'll see what happens with Nolan Patrick. Obviously, that was our second overall pick. But a guy like Konechny, like people have given up on him. But reality is, I mean, he put up 70 points last year. He was on fire. I don't think these kids. Again, this is what I expect from young guys, for them to go like this. I expect the veterans to stay steady.
Okay, what about who's an Aho? Who's a Natchez? I mean, look at
Aho wasn't an Aho. Well, Svechnikov is special.
I'm just saying that the progression and where these kids are at, the Flyers don't have.
I would say Farabee is on Svechnikov's level right now, in my opinion. He's having a humongous what he did this year with the fact that every player in the league, not in the league, I'm sorry, in our team, kind of stunk, and he did what he did. I think he's much better than people realize. I understand why I understand why people think we don't have blue chip prospects, but I definitely think we do. I think our problem is that our veteran core around them is not good enough. So when you put the weight on these kids, they'll crumble. And you see it almost everywhere. Like look at New Jersey. Like Jack Hughes is not a blue chip prospect.
Oh, he is?
Exactly. Yeah. And that team still stinks.
Yeah, but I mean, you got to build a lot around it.
Yeah.
See, it's a lot easier to accelerate to contention when you have that next level talent. The Flyers don't have a lot of guys like that. And
well, they don't have a guy who like you're going to be like, oh, this guy's going to lead the team or lead the league in points for the next. Like he's not going to be top 5 in points, the top 10 in the league.
Exactly.
Okay.
You have to but the only way you can succeed like that is like St. Louis or Carolina did a couple of years ago. Well, 06. You have to have a lot of depth. Boy, I tell you, you gotta really get lucky. You gotta stay healthy. You have to have a hot goalie. It's a lot. It's the exception, not the rule.
They didn't sustain it either, right? To your point, they didn't sustain it, right? They were not the same team they were the next year. That's the reality of most of the teams. And everybody likes to shit on the Flyers, but if you look at the majority of Cup winners over the past, 15 years, it's like the same teams almost every time. It's like the Blackhawks. Again, if you have Crosby, right? I mean, if you have that type of name, You can do that.
Taves and Kane. I think the Flyers need to get a really good
Taves is player. But Taves is not as good as Claude Giroux. Hey, that team was exceptional.
At one point, he was as good. In fact, he was a better defensive player. He was a better all-around player.
I wouldn't agree with that. I would say Claude Giroux is better than Jonathan Taves. Jonathan Taves is an amazing
Jonathan
captain.
Taves could deliver at times, and Claude Giroux just wasn't
Claude Giroux. See, but Claude Giroux in that time was like a heroic player. He was a heroic player for us forever. Our team is not good enough. That's what drives me nuts.
Well, now, yeah, well, sure. I mean, when he was in his absolute prime, no, they just weren't good enough. He didn't have enough around them. But I think you had a lot of really good players with those teams, and it has been kind of a dynasty
team was
setup.
Yeah. Well, those teams had dynasties. That's what I'm saying. Like even the Kings. Like they had so much talent around their best players. Like Anze Kopitar is exceptional. You know, we don't talk about him that often, but he's an exceptional player. When you put the right players around him, Drew Doughty, right? People are down on Drew Doughty. That's a guy I would trade for. He's expensive as hell, but that's a guy I'm like, he can change your locker room. Chris Pronger, when he came here at 35 years old, that guy changed our team immediately. One player. That's the type of guy I would invest in right now. And I think that can bring us up. Giroux is not a generational talent. Right, that's your Austin Matthews, that's your McDavid, right? Those guys are generational. No matter who's on their team, they're going to be at the top of the league in points, right? But there's not many of them in the league, and that's the problem. You know, there's
I'll put it this way. I mean, I'd be looking to see, even though he's got baggage, I'd be taking a hard look at Jack Eichel
absolutely. See if I would love to steal him.
He's got baggage. There's no doubt about it.
I'll take the baggage. I'll take the baggage. Look at that Sabres team. Everybody who's gone there has lost. That's kind of okay. They're a great example. They couldn't even have Eric Stahl on their team. That guy is immune to bad energy, and yet that place is so messed up that they couldn't even keep him. Taylor Hall, a former MVP, just disappears. There's something wrong, and that's what I mean. That's what I'm worried about with the Flyers. Is like, is it not even a talent thing? Is it like?
It's from the top down in Buffalo, and I think it's from the top down here. We'll hopefully not.
Let's hope not. Buffalo's never gotten out of that. We've actually had fluctuations. Buffalo's just been. So let's hope we never end up as Buffalo. God forbid. All right. We're at an hour and a half. This was an awesome episode. I loved it. And even though I don't agree, I agree with a lot of what you said. Even though we don't fully agree, I think you represent a large portion of the fan base that needs to be heard. And I think that management always needs to be held accountable. Like, I think it's very important for them to hear this isn't good enough. Make the excuse. It doesn't matter. We want more. So they stay hungry and they figure out that amazing deal that brings Chris Pronger over here. You know, it's time. We have the assets to do it. You can't wait anymore. Yeah. That's it. We have it. We have the first round picks. We have the young players. Bring somebody in. Bring somebody in. We need superstar here. We need another superstar. We can't keep going. Why isn't Claude Giroux doing it? Why isn't Couturier? Bring in another guy. Bring in somebody twice as good as Niskanen. Then people will stop complaining, you know? Yeah. All right. This was awesome. One more shout out. Tell everybody where you can or tell people where they can follow you and anything else that maybe is coming up. Isiah, you go first.
Yeah, well, we have a show tomorrow night. We're going to do the O&B autopsy on the Flyers. And you can follow the O&B Puckcast at O&B Puck at O&B Puck. You can follow me. It says there in the corner at Isiah_520. Isiah_, don't forget that, 520 if you want to yell at me at my silly opinions. And so we're going to have a show tomorrow night, and we're looking forward to it.
Glad we got your mic fixed because you said a lot of good stuff, and it would have been a shame if we had the crackling over your voice because you had some great fire in this episode. I loved it.
You're fired.
Jeff.
Yeah, you can find me at Chef the Left B. It says it right down there in the corner at Twitter. And shout at me, tell me, hell, if you want a recipe, I'll even give you a recipe too. But just we love the interaction. We're doing another show tomorrow night. It should be a really good one as well. We're going to dissect everything. Just like science class when you were a kid, that frog doesn't stand a chance.
Now you're crackling.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say it's like bad energy all of a sudden. Well,
oops.
Thanks for having us on, man.
Is that better now?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. This was really fun. I'm really glad that I got to have you guys on. And I think the Flyers deserved everything, we nailed them for today. And I appreciate what you guys are saying, because a lot of people feel the way you do about the team. And I think they need to be represented in that voice. I think, again, like I said, management needs to be held accountable. Like, I do understand. I'm very understanding of young players and all that. But at the end of the day, they shit the bed this year. Bad, and it was painful. And this city, forget what I think, people will not stand for it, and they will stop watching. And we cannot have that. We do not want to fall into irrelevancy. It's unacceptable. So I agree with you. We need to get aggressive this off season. All right. And thank you everybody for watching. Like, subscribe, leave comments. I try to read them all. I try to comment as many as I can. And definitely like and subscribe. Share our stuff out if you can as well. That also is a humongous help. Check out the team store. Follow Jamie. Follow myself. Follow all of the writers. And remember to always stay gritty.